Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Cricket Talks. I'm joined by the wonderful Naresh again to preview the massive World Cup final and just generally what's happening in the cricket world. Welcome to the show, Naresh.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks for having me again, and been an exciting week. And congratulations to you for Australia making it to the finals.
Yeah. We're going to go straight into it. Basically, World Cup predictions. So, what is your prediction for the World Cup final and why?
Now the entire thing has changed. If you remember when we started, my prediction was England and West Indies from Group 1 and India and Pakistan from Group 2. So all that has completely changed. To see the top four, 50% went right, but now we have Australia and New Zealand making it. Surprisingly, Australia lost to England in the group stage, and New Zealand lost to Pakistan. So both the teams have actually peaked at the right time, New Zealand and Australia. But looking at how the semi-finals went, yes, in these conditions, toss makes a huge impact. The team wants to chase, but I think Australia looks more rounded team and have peaked, and that peak makes Australia more dangerous. They are a team for big occasions we have seen in the past. So I predict Australia for this final. And the other impact of Conway now ruled out for New Zealand. He did very well in the semi-finals. Yeah, I'll bank on Australia for this final. Yeah.
I'd probably agree with you there, Naresh. Australia are the better side. Rightio, Pakistan versus Australia. We're going to try and break down this game. Matthew Wade's quickfire 41, which everyone's been talking about, as well as David Warner hitting 49 and Stoinis making 40 runs, leads to Australia winning an exciting run chase and heading into the World Cup final. What's your thoughts on this?
If you see, both the games went at the same pace, but talking about Pakistan, Australia, Pakistan had a wonderful start. At halfway stage, they were 70 when the first wicket fell, Babar Azam. And Babar Azam and Rizwan have been their main, even before the World Cup, they have come with the reputation that they are the best openers and to look out for, very dangerous. Little subdued start, you can say, Babar Azam. One of them had to go very aggressive, which you saw more in Rizwan. But I think that was a very good start they had. They had about 40 plus in the power play, 70 at 10th over. But after that, I think Australia could pull them back, but still 176 was good in a semi-final setup, but anything in Dubai can be chased. You need to get close to 190, 200 to even look at those opportunities. Whereas on the other side, Australia didn't have a good start. Shaheen Afridi again got a similar ball, which got Rohit Sharma out against India, got Aaron Finch. But they were ahead. I think Mitch Marsh and David Warner steadied it. They were ahead at power play. They were ahead at halfway stage at 10 overs, but a couple of wickets more. What changed was 11th over when Warner got out, which actually he walked off, and the replay shows that he didn't edge it. And then a couple of overs later, Maxwell got out. I think at that stage, I felt Australia lost the way. But it was Stoinis that made a difference to start with. Wade finished it, but where Pakistan faltered was that 1/6 of Stoinis, which could have been a catch at deep mid-wicket, the fielder was in. If he was at the boundary, that could have been a catch. It was 96 for 5. They could have been 96 for 6. But then Stoinis completely took charge and then helped Wade to make that attack, which happened when he got an opportunity of a drop catch. But I think it was Stoinis and Wade, after that 96 for 5, making the difference to go unbeaten and get the runs. And irony, both identical. It finished in 19th over when they were chasing. Requirement was more than 12 and over. They actually finished off in 19th over and 1 over to spare.
So that was a very good game. And on to New Zealand versus England, or England-New Zealand. New Zealand won the game by 5 wickets with an over to spare with Daryl Mitchell, the star hitting 72 runs, and Devon Conway assisting with a handy 46, who is unfortunately out of the World Cup final. But Naresh, share your thoughts on this game. It was a similar game to Pakistan-Australia, similar patterns, you would say, right?
Yeah. And 166 was, you can say, par, but, again, chasing has been easy, so it wasn't that sure. I think New Zealand did well to pull it back a little bit in the 19th, 20th over, because 18th over went for about 16 runs, and England was looking at attacking all the time with Malan and Livingstone. Little bit on the New Zealand inning, I felt Morgan. I still don't know why Moeen Ali was not used with the ball, initially, I felt Mark Wood was not the right replacement for Mills because a left-hander. They had David Willey in the reserves, so that's my opinion. That probably they would have continued with a left-arm seamer as a variation, but they went in for Mark Wood. But it was Neesham. I think the Neesham inning let loose even Michelle. I think they had again a slow start with Guptill getting out early, but then, as you said, Conway and Michelle setting it up. But it was Neesham. That 17th over of Chris Jordan completely moved the pendulum towards New Zealand, and England started feeling the pressure. That was a huge over. They needed about 50 odd in 4 overs, and they just did it in 18 balls because of that big 23-run over, the 17th one by Chris Jordan.
Right, we're into the WBBL and the domestic Sheffield Shield cricket. Lots of rained-off games, including a men's domestic one-day match between New South Wales and Victoria, and also the last 2 WBBL matches. Melbourne Renegades are on top of the ladder with the Scorchers 2nd place, Brisbane 3rd place, and Melbourne Stars are 4th in the WBBL. We have a double-header today, starting with Hurricanes v Strikers, then Heat v Sixers. And tomorrow morning, the Heat will play another game that will be against Adelaide Strikers. Then there'll be a Sydney Derby. Thunder and Sixers will be awesome. And Beth Mooney has had an awesome season with the most runs so far in the tournament. She hit a brilliant 83 runs off 53 balls in the rained-off game against the Sydney Thunder. The Sheffield Shield and WA have beaten Queensland by 7 wickets, and Jai Richardson got bowling figures of 5 for 23. And also Tasmania are playing South Australia right now, and it looks like a relatively close game with Tasmania slight favourites. I also need to say Josh Philippe's 100. I'm a big fan of Josh Philippe, and it's a shame he didn't get picked in the T20 World Cup squad, but it's good seeing him do well for WA, and he has a chance, hopefully, of getting in the Ashes if he keeps up with the good form. It's missing India. What's your thoughts on them not making the finals? What was it? Was it, biosecure bubbles? Was it that they weren't doing enough? Was it the coaching? What made India not do well enough in the tournament to reach the finals? Or was it just the opposition's lifted their game?
Externally, you can see a lot of factors and debate about things. First, I'll speak about the games. India-Pakistan is more an emotional kind of a game. It's fully charged up. I think India initially started very poorly, 6 for 2, then struggled, got another wicket, 3rd wicket fell in the power play. So when you lose 2 to 3 wickets in the power play, it is tough to make a comeback. But still, 151, 152 looked decent because of Virat Kohli's 50 and Rishabh Pant 30. But probably they were short another 15, 20 runs there. But I think Pakistan outplayed with the bat, the way they chased, Azam and Rizwan, really timing their chase so well. You can say a bit of average bowling by India. I think on that day, it was only Shaheen Afridi who bowled the right length. Any other pacer, either you take from Pakistan or from India, they didn't bowl the right length, and it was easy to score. Emotionally, it matters because we lost to Pakistan. But it's the second game which impacted India, the game against New Zealand. India got only 110. Again, the batting faltered, and New Zealand chased in 14.5 overs. I think that mathematically impacted India. 2 big games, 2 big losses. So it was like just catching up. By that time, Pakistan had already played 3 games and won all their 3 games. That's where India faltered in the big games. What you compare to the remaining 3 games, the way the openers played. So that was the most critical part. The openers failed in the first 2 games. But yeah, other aspects of a huge 3.5-month tour of England, different weather conditions, coming back to Dubai in UAE, very different conditions. The bio-bubble movements, IPL, and then getting into the World Cup. Again, a 1-week gap between a Pakistan game and a New Zealand game. A lot of factors can be into consideration on how the calendar went for India. But they faltered in the big games. That mattered most.
Would you say that, looking back, do you reckon they could have picked different players as well, India? Like maybe tried some younger players, someone a bit different? Because it's a shorter format. There's a lot of comments saying Gaikwad would do well for India, that all these new IPL stars that have been around for 1 or 2 years at most would really grasp it. I'm not saying Gaikwad's very new to IPL. He's been around for a little while. He's relatively young, I believe, from what I know. Yeah. I don't watch enough IPL, but it seems to me that Indian side of just that wasn't quite their full strength team. You're right about the openers. It wasn't what I'm used to seeing of them, what they did against Australia, what they did against England at home back in February. That wasn't the side that I saw playing in the World Cup.
Yeah, and you're right. The side was picked just in between of the beginning of the IPL second phase. The side was announced, and the side was more on reputation and experience. That was a T20 side. If you see players like Ishan Kishan, Surya Kumar, they did very well last year in the IPL in the UAE. That's why they made it to the Indian team when England toured India. So they were more on reputation and experience. Whereas the current players who performed in UAE leg of IPL, who were in form, there was a window where changes could be made, but probably selectors felt that just too many would not go well. So they backed the selected team. Again, I'm saying more to do with experience and reputation and not with that current form. And that's where India faltered. The current form players were not picked when there was a window to make the changes. And I think it cost us.
Onto the cricket question segment. Was there too much cricket and biosecure bubbles for cricket players this year? That's a big question, but just in general, we've heard about India. We've heard about all these cricket leagues going on, the WBBL, the Sheffield Shield, and tours, all that sort of stuff. Don't you just think players are exhausted?
Oh, yes, definitely. Travel involved, also in a very restricted environment, stay in a restricted environment. There are some tours where families are allowed, some tours where families are not there with them. They are away. Generally, they are away from home. There's not much of freedom to do things. So it is definitely, it works on them. And yes, you can say a backlog of 2020 being made up in 2021 with the calendar getting more and more tight. What impacted most, obviously more to India and most of overseas players, was also the IPL getting suspended due to unavoidable reasons in April, May. If that would have gone as scheduled, you could have felt that there was a little room. But because the IPL had to be completed, more important, to be fit in between the England tour of India and the World Cup, overseas players, many of them opted out of the second leg. Indian players, yes, it's an Indian league, went ahead and played. But in the end, there's lots that happening. What can be done? How ICC can relook at all the calendars, because even 2020 looks busy, 23 looks busy. There are 2 World Cups in these years. And I think that is where most of the teams you will start seeing getting into different players for different formats and how they're going to balance that out. England, we keep hearing about balancing, work balance. The way they have rotated their team for test matches, especially when they toured India. When India toured England, you have seen different players. Australia, most of the players in the World Cup opted out of Bangladesh and West Indies tour. And that is where it came out that that was the only way to prepare. But the way they got together in the World Cup and have peaked now, probably it's working well, because if you take a break, you are more refreshed. Whereas if you're in touch with the game, probably it's getting a bit too much for you because of the bio bubble environment. So a lot of things to learn for players and for the organizers.
So the final cricket question for you is, how can we keep cricket functioning mostly normal if global warming gets worse? What should we do?
Yeah, that's very tricky one, because if you see, a lot of cricket is still focused on very few destinations or locations or countries that are playing. You need to start moving towards more different locations. And one obviously is how are they going to manage? Because see, most of the cricket is now happening on the lights. That is another concern which may come up when it comes to global warming and other things that are happening. Because you need a lot of other resources to keep those facilities on, we may go backwards by looking at playing more day games under natural light, and have lesser crowds. That's the other thing. The crowds currently, especially in Australia and India, are huge. There are huge requirements for the crowd, the way they commute to those stadiums. So there are some challenges which has to be looked into, and how this needs to be managed. But it's going to be it's a long drawn process on what steps need to be taken.
We get to the end of the podcast now, and thank you so much for joining, Naresh. It was an absolute honour. So at the start of the World Cup and now at the end. It's been a wonderful World Cup. Really, thank you for giving up your time.
Thanks, and good luck for a big game, a big final. I think it's going to be exciting. The way the semi-finals have gone, I'm sure the final will also be lit up with some very close game. Yeah.
Yes. So viewers, don't forget to like and subscribe and look at some of Naresh's stuff. He does a podcast in Hindi, which is specializes in cricket if you can understand Hindi, and it's very interesting, the stuff he does. So have a look at that. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you guys in the video. Next video. Bye for now.